Imagine this: you're standing in a quiet room, the kind where the silence feels almost sentient. There's no sound, no movement, just you and a mirror. But it's not just any mirror. It doesn't reflect the clothes you're wearing or the color of your eyes. It shows something deeper, something you've spent years trying to bury under politeness, success, distraction, or even spirituality. And as you stare, this mirror doesn't blink. It shows the parts of you that lie, the part that envies, that fantasizes about destruction, that hates your own reflection, that secretly resents the people you claim to love. It shows the twisted whispers you drown out with noise: your rage, your shame, your cruelty, your hidden hunger for power. All of it. Would you dare look? Most wouldn't, because this is the part of the psyche Carl Jung called the shadow, everything about yourself you've denied, rejected, or banished to the basement of your awareness. But just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't running your life. Here's the paradox. The more you ignore it, the more it owns you. You think you're making decisions freely? That your habits, your relationships, your ambitions are born out of conscious choice? What if I told you they're not? What if the parts of yourself you've labeled unacceptable are pulling the strings in silence, disguised as fate, dressed up as instinct, masked as morality? You might tell yourself you're a good person, that you don't need to explore the darkness within you. But Jung warned that without confronting the shadow, we become its puppet. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he said, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Now picture this. You snap at someone you love for a petty reason, and instantly feel regret. You tell yourself you're just tired. But deep down, that moment was loaded. It wasn't fatigue, it was years of unspoken resentment finally slipping through the cracks, a shadow breaking free. Or maybe you sabotage an opportunity again. You call it bad timing, bad luck. But something inside you fears success. Why? Because some buried part of you believes you don't deserve it. That's the shadow, too cleverly disguised as self-doubt. What if the things you despise in others are the exact things you refuse to see in yourself? Projection is the shadow's favorite game. The corrupt politician, the greedy CEO, the manipulative what if they're mirrors? Ugly truths that echo your own repressed potential for the same darkness? The real question isn't, do I have a shadow? It's this. What is my shadow doing to me when I'm not looking? This is where the ground beneath our sense of self begins to crack. You see, the shadow isn't just about hidden evil, it's about hidden truth. Everything you've labeled as unacceptable isn't just darkness. It's power. It's passion. It's the raw, unfiltered energy of your psyche distorted only because it's been caged. By rejecting it, you become a fractured being, half human, half mask. You smile while suppressing rage. You give while seething with envy. You become nice but not whole. And deep down, you know something's wrong. Like there's a ticking inside you. A pressure. A scream behind the polite silence of your life. Maybe that's why you're drawn to chaos, why you pick the wrong people, crave the wrong things, or chase impossible goals. Maybe your shadow isn't hidden at all. Maybe it's screaming to be seen through the madness you can't explain. What if your addictions, obsessions, irrational fears, what if they're just the shadow's language? Its way of saying, look at me, I exist. I'm not your enemy, I'm your missing piece. And here lies the great and terrible question. Can you become whole without facing what you've tried to forget? Can you master your mind without mastering the monster hiding in its basement? Because what Jung discovered, and what so many fear to admit, is that true transformation doesn't come from light alone. It comes from descending into your own psychological underworld and emerging not as a saint, but as someone who has made peace with their own darkness. not conquered it, not destroyed it, integrated it. So ask yourself, what have you buried? What are you afraid you'll find if you dig too deep? Who would you become if you stopped pretending to be perfect and instead embraced the truth of your fractured humanity? The answers are not comforting, but they are liberating. And this is where the journey begins, not in becoming something new, but in reclaiming what you've always been and feared to face. Now step closer to that mirror, because the shadow is waiting, and the mind can never be free until the shadow is seen. You didn't choose to be divided. Long before you learned how to speak in full sentences, the splitting began. The world around you whispered 1,000 silent rules. Don't cry so loud. Don't stare too long. Don't say what you really think. Smile even when you're hurting. Be strong. Be good. Be normal. You weren't given a guidebook, you were given a mask. And the moment you put it on, you became two people. The one you show and the one you bury. That buried self, that constellation of rejected thoughts, emotions, and instincts is what Carl Jung called the shadow. It's not evil. It's not dangerous. It's human. But the moment culture told you that parts of yourself were unacceptable, you didn't stop feeling them. You just learned to feel them in secret. You adapted, because adaptation equals survival. You became what your parents applauded, what your teachers rewarded, what your peers accepted. But every time you said yes while meaning no, every time you bit your tongue, every time you swallowed a scream, you didn't erase those emotions. You just shoved them deeper. The shadow is born from that silence, but it doesn't stay silent. It waits. It watches. And it grows. Jung's brilliance lay in seeing that the psyche is not one-dimensional. It's a labyrinth. And the shadow isn't just the place where we store anger, shame, or envy. It's also where we exile courage, sexuality, creativity, and truth, simply because they don't fit the version of us the world demands. This is the hidden problem. You've been taught to fear the most essential parts of yourself. You believe you're making conscious choices, but the shadow influences every step. Why did you fall in love with someone who couldn't love you back? Why do you pursue goals that leave you empty? Why does praise feel like a lie and silence feel like punishment? The answer isn't fate. It's the unconscious. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned that when we deny the animal in ourselves, we become more monstrous, not less. Beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster, he wrote. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. What Nietzsche and Jung both understood is that the abyss isn't out there. It's inside. And the longer you refuse to acknowledge it, the more power it gains. You see the same thing in Arthur Schopenhauer's concept of the willow blind, primal force that drives all human behavior. Reason, morality, religion, their window dressing. Underneath, we are governed by instinct. And when those instincts are denied, they don't disappear. They mutate into resentment, into depression, into projection. Your shadow doesn't stay locked in your mind. It leaks. It seeps into how you talk to others, how you punish yourself, how you interpret the world. You think you're being rational, but most of your thoughts are defenses. Most of your beliefs are compromises. Most of your values were inherited, not chosen. And here's the great irony. The more you try to be good, the more fragmented you become. Society doesn't want wholeness. It wants obedience. And the easiest way to ensure obedience is to reward suppression. To convince you that the parts of you that feel inconvenient are wrong. But Jung warned that this repression leads to one thing: neurosis. Not because you are sick, but because you are split. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the lie we tell ourselves to survive. We pretend to be someone we're not, because the truth is too risky. We say, "This is just how life is," when what we really mean is, "This is the version of life I was told to accept." Even the sacred isn't immune. Aldous Huxley saw how mysticism and religion could become just another mask, a way to bypass pain rather than confront it. He once wrote, "Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. Your shadow is one of those facts." And Viktor Frankl, from the depths of a concentration camp, discovered something few dare to accept. That meaning is not handed to use, it is created. But meaning built on a fractured self is fragile. It crumbles the moment the persona cracks. So here you are. A self made of parts. A life built on compromise. An identity crafted through omission. And the question now emerges not quietly, but violently. If the version of you that the world accepts is incomplete, who have you become by hiding the rest? Because here lies the deepest wound. You didn't just lose connection to your shadow. You lost connection to choice. You didn't choose your name, your beliefs, your fears, your limits. You inherited them, absorbed them, reacted to them. But if you can inherit an identity, you can also reclaim one. Jung believed that only by integrating the shadow could you access the full spectrum of your mind, and with it, the possibility of true freedom. Until then, you are living in a dream, and not a beautiful one. So now, we begin to understand, you are not suffering because of who you are. You are suffering because of who you were not allowed to be. And that forbidden self is not gone. It's waiting. Behind your habits, inside your resistance, beneath your anxiety. It's not a demon. It's the key, and the door it opens leads not to escape, but to awakening. You think you've escaped it. That because you've buried it. You've beaten it. But the shadow doesn't vanish, it migrates. It moves from your mind into your muscles, into your relationships, into your reflexes. It becomes the tremble in your voice when you try to speak your truth, the tightness in your chest when someone gets too close, the burning resentment in your smile when you're praised for being someone you're not. You think you're functioning just fine, but function isn't freedom, it's performance. And under the performance, the shadow grows more cunning. It learns your language. It knows how to mimic your voice. It wears your ambition like a mask. It becomes invisible until it's not. You wake up one day and realize your life doesn't feel like your own. Your job, your friendships, your routines, they don't fit. Not because something is wrong out there, but because something inside you has been silenced for too long. And that silence begins to ache. Not as a scream, but as a dull, persistent erosion. Your choices begin to rot from the inside. Why did you sabotage that relationship right when it started to feel real? Why did you quit something meaningful and chase a hollow goal? Why do you feel anxious after success, but relieved in failure? Because the shadow is whispering, "This is not who we are." And when you ignore that whisper long enough, it turns into consequences. Consequences so subtle, you won't even know their punishment. You'll call it burnout. You'll call it depression. You'll say, "Maybe I just need a break," or "I should be grateful I have everything I wanted." But that's the trap. When the unconscious governs your reality, even your desires aren't truly yours. Your goals are shaped by absence. Your ambitions by shame. Your dreams by fear. That's the quiet apocalypse of a life governed by a rejected self. Modern psychology often dresses this up. It calls it maladaptive behavior, self-sabotage, imposter syndrome. But these are symptoms, not roots. The root is disconnection from the unconscious. The root is the divide within. Carl Jung saw this long before it became trendy to do the work. He knew that a divided psyche doesn't just collapse, it fractures the world around it. The internal war becomes external. Think about it. The person who cannot own their anger becomes passive-aggressive, manipulative, emotionally cold. The one who cannot admit their sexual desires becomes cruel in love, distant in intimacy, judgmental in spirit. The man who refuses to face his inadequacy becomes obsessed with dominance. The woman who buries her rage becomes a martyr, then a ghost. This isn't rare, it's everywhere. The shadow doesn't wait for permission. It leaks into parenting, into leadership, into culture, into history. Why do entire nations fall into cycles of oppression and rebellion? Why do ideologies always seem to repeat their own mistakes? Because the collective shadow is just as real and just as repressed as the individual one. When a culture defines strength as invulnerability, it creates men who cannot cry. When it defines femininity as self-sacrifice, it creates women who cannot say no. When a society glorifies happiness but pathologizes grief, it raises generations unable to mourn what they've lost. And when these disowned emotions are pushed far enough down, they erupt, not as insight, but as crisis. Crisis is the shadow's loudest voice. It shows up in the midlife breakdown, the panic attack, the addiction spiral, the violent outburst. You think it's sudden, but the shadow has been preparing its entrance for years, waiting for the moment when the weight of denial finally cracks your carefully curated life. And here's the terrifying part. The longer you avoid it, the more destructive it becomes. Because repression is not containment, it's distortion. What could have been power becomes manipulation. What could have been passion becomes obsession. What could have been sadness becomes numbness. You lose your inner compass. You no longer ask, "What do I want?" You ask, "What will make this feeling stop?" And in that desperation, you become exploitable. You chase gurus. You swallow ideologies. You cling to relationships that hurt you because at least they distract you from the howl within. You mistake busyness for purpose. You mistake validation for love. You mistake control for safety. But none of it works. Because nothing outside of you can compensate for what you've disowned inside of you. This is the real tragedy. The shadow isn't just the part you fear. It's the part you need. It holds your intuition, your resilience, your boundaries, your depth. You've amputated the very limb that could have carried you through the storm. So you stand in the wreckage of decisions you don't remember making. You apologize for wounds you never meant to cause. You mourn a life that looks fine on paper, but feels like a lie in your chest. And still, the world rewards your performance. So you keep pretending. But pretending is a form of death. A slow, quiet one. The kind that doesn't take your body, just your presence, until one day something shifts. A moment, a breakdown, a line you can't uncross. And suddenly, you're not just tired, you're done. Done avoiding, done lying, done being a stranger to your own life. That's when the real work begins. Because the shadow won't punish you for what you've buried. It will welcome you back. It never wanted control. It just wanted to be seen. So you keep pretending. But pretending is a form of death. A slow, quiet one. The kind that doesn't take your body, just your presence, until one day something shifts. A moment, a breakdown, a line you can't uncross. And suddenly, you're not just tired, you're done. Done avoiding, done lying, done being a stranger to your own life. That's when the real work begins. Because the shadow won't punish you for what you've buried. It will welcome you back. It never wanted control. It just wanted to be seen. It doesn't begin with fire. It begins with stillness. A moment where you stop running, where you stop scrolling, performing, numbing, where you feel the silence, not as emptiness but as invitation. That's when the rebellion begins, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet defiance of facing what you were never supposed to face. Yourself. You were taught to fear your darkness, taught that anger makes you dangerous, that sadness makes you weak, that desire makes you impure. And so, for years, you've been trying to fix yourself. But what if the real rebellion isn't fixing at all? What if it's remembering who you were before the world told you who to be? Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, not becoming someone new, but becoming who you truly are, by integrating the parts you abandoned. And this is no self-help gimmick. It's psychological war. Because to reclaim what you've buried means going into the territory you swore was forbidden. It means standing in the ruins of your false self and whispering, "I am not afraid of the dark, but the world will be," because wholeness looks like heresy to a culture addicted to masks. When you stop pretending, you become unpredictable. When you stop apologizing for your feelings, you become powerful. When you stop disowning your shadow, you become whole. And wholeness cannot be controlled. You'll be called selfish for drawing boundaries, arrogant for owning your power, cold for protecting your energy, unstable for refusing to conform. But those labels are nothing but the screams of a system losing its grip on your soul. Because here's the truth. No one dares say out loud. Most people don't want freedom. They want comfort. They want approval. They want a life that looks meaningful without having to burn for it. But you're different. You're reading this because some part of you is already on fire. And the only way forward is through that fire, not around it. So how do you break free? First, you descend, not spiritually, psychologically. You journal your anger instead of hiding it behind positivity. You sit with your envy instead of moralizing it away. You trace the outline of your shame without trying to erase it. You do the terrifying work of feeling what you've never allowed yourself to feel. This isn't a weekend retreat. It's a revolution. Second, you name the shadow. Jung said the shadow thrives in silence. Give it language, not as enemy, but as exiled kin. This rage I feel, it's not evil. It's mine, and it's trying to tell me something. When you name the shadow, you pull it into the light not to kill it, but to understand it. Third, you integrate. This means recognizing that you are not either, or you are both. The light and the dark. The healer and the destroyer. The lover and the animal. The saint and the savage. Integration is not morale, it is real. And realness is messy. It doesn't always look nice, but it is the only path to liberation. Fourth, you allow the transformation. The more you reclaim, the more you change. Your voice gets deeper. Your presence gets heavier. Your words cut through illusion. People will feel it. Some will leave. Let them. The ones who remain will not love your mask, they will love you. Fully, ferociously. Finally, historical figures knew this path. Not saints. Warriors of the self. Siddhartha Gautama left the palace and sat beneath the Bodhi tree, not to become enlightened, but to confront suffering. His own, the world's. Enlightenment came only after the shadow was faced. Jesus of Nazareth entered the desert not to perform miracles but to wrestle with temptation, his own shadow in symbolic form. He returned transformed, unshakable, rebellious, whole. Carl Jung himself had a breakdown so profound that he thought he was going mad. Instead of resisting it, he dove in, drawing mandalas, conversing with archetypes, letting the psyche reveal itself on its own terms. Out of that descent came his most groundbreaking work. Because he didn't run from the abyss, he walked into a tan returned with gold. And now, it's your turn. You will lose things along the way. Illusions, expectations, false friendships, sometimes even your identity. But what you'll gain will be impossible to describe. A presence, a clarity, a knowing that no external validation can match. And from that place of wholeness, you will begin to shape a life not based on fear, but on truth. You'll love not to be loved back, but because love flows through you. You'll create not for attention, but because creation is your nature. You'll speak not to be heard, but because your silence no longer needs to protect you. And most dangerously of all, you will not be manipulated. Not by shame, not by guilt, not by propaganda or performance or pressure. You will know who you are. And a person who knows who they are is the greatest threat to any system built on obedience. So don't wait for permission. Burn the script. Leave the stage. Step into the raw, sacred, terrifying unknown. And in that wilderness of your own being, find the one thing you've always been searching for, the self you buried to survive, now ready to rise and reign. There comes a moment quiet, unannounced, where the storm inside finally goes still. Not because the chaos has ended, but because you've stopped fighting it. You sit in the ruins of everything you thought you were, surrounded by the fragments of belief, identity, morality, memory, and realize something devastatingly beautiful. You are not broken. You are unfinished. The shadow was never your enemy. It was your blueprint. The part of you that held the raw, unshaped material of who you were meant to become. And everything you ran from? That was the map. The anger, the shame, the forbidden desires, they weren't mistakes. They were invitations. You were never meant to kill the darkness. You were meant to marry it. This is the final truth, the one that shifts the ground beneath your soul. You are not one self. You are a multiplicity, a constellation of opposites, a paradox in motion, a living contradiction made divine through awareness. And when you stop trying to resolve that contradiction, you awaken. Carl Jung called it the self-totality that transcends the ego. Not the persona you present, not the shadow you fear, but the union of both. The ego says, I am this. The shadow says, you are also that. And the self says, I am all of it and more. Can you feel it? That tremble in your gut when you imagine a life where nothing within you is exiled, where rage can sit at the same table as compassion, where lust walks beside wisdom, where grief becomes your deepest teacher, not your burden. It's not perfection. It's power. And it doesn't come from controlling the mind. It comes from knowing it. Every dark corridor, every hidden room, every secret whisper you tried to erase. The final transformation isn't clean. It's sacred filth. It's staring your inner monster in the face and realizing it has your eyes. It always did. You see, the spiritual path isn't about rising above the human condition. It's about descending into it so fully that you finally realize there is no condition. There is only consciousness. Choosing form, wearing masks, writing myths, dancing in the theater of time. And here you are, center stage, no longer clinging to roles, no longer performing salvation, just present, real, alive. Can you live like this? Can you be the kind of human who carries both dagger and dove in their chest, who chooses peace, not out of fear of violence, but from having mastered it? Can you love someone not because they reflect your light, but because they've made peace with your shadow? Can you live in a world of false prophets and digital godsend, still listen to the quiet, ancient voice inside you that says, I am, I have always been, I will always be becoming? This is not enlightenment. This is embodiment, and it will cost you everything that isn't real. It will strip you of status, identity, persona, false morality, even the illusion of control. But in its place, it gives you something no religion, system, or psychology can offer. Freedom. Freedom not as escape, but as presence. Freedom to be radically honest, to live without masks, to speak without performance, to grieve without shame, to create without apology, to destroy what no longer serves you without guilt. This is the power of shadow work. Not to make you perfect, not to make you loved, to make you real. And in that reality, you become unshakable, because there is nothing left to hide. You've met yourself in the underworld. You've made the unconscious conscious. And now, no one can use your past against you. No one can manipulate your fear. No one can fracture you because you are already whole. Imagine walking through the world like that. Imagine waking up one morning and no longer needing to be anything for anyone. You just are. And in that being, you hold space for others to do the same. You become the mirror, the terrifying, beautiful mirror. Not because you reflect perfection, but because you reflect truth. And that truth is this: you are not here to be good. You are not here to be light. You are here to be whole, to know yourself completely, to walk as both myth and animal, to hold love in one hand and fire in the other, to build temples not in the sky but in your own bones. Because the greatest realization is not that the shadow was a part of you, it's that the shadow was you calling you home all along. So go ahead, turn off the noise, step out of the roles. Look in the mirror, not the one on your wall, but the one behind your eyes, and ask, without fear, who am I when nothing is hidden? You may not answer with words, but your life will answer for you. With presence, with power, with peace. Not the peace of silence, the peace of integration. The war is over. You are whole, and your mind is finally yours.